So today I want to talk about trade conviction. What does it actually mean that I have conviction in a trade? That I feel strongly that a certain thing has a high priority chance of occurring, and therefore I will take the trade and have a certain willingness to take risk in that trade. And when does my conviction fail, or when is it proven wrong? And I think this is something that's really important for us to understand because, if you sit here and you say, okay, here is my setup in a trade, fundamental, technical, doesn't really matter. You say, I have conviction in this trade. You have to be willing to also say, here is where or here is how I will be proven wrong, or to identify that I no longer have conviction in this trade. Ideally, we set this up ahead of time so that we can know in advance at what level or at what condition, perhaps, if it's a fundamental idea, will we lose our conviction in this trade and understand that we need to reconsider our position from a trade standpoint. And then we need to, if not, do it ahead of time. We need to be able to analyze the trade while we're in it. If this is a more flexible conviction that you're able to have, to say, okay, how do I feel today about this trade? Again, whether it's a technical setup or it's a fundamental setup, how do I feel today about this trade? How does that line up to how I felt when I started the trade? Do I still feel like the target is in sight? Has it gone the way that I anticipate so far? And do I continue to be on the same side of that conviction, or have I changed my mind? And depending on how we feel about that, how do we adjust our position? Perhaps we're in profit if we're already in this trade, but we're starting to lose our conviction in the original idea. Do we decide to exit the trade earlier than we originally anticipated? Or has the trade gone against us, but we're still convicted that we're on the right side? If you say, hey, I think we're in a recession right now, and I think that the market needs to go down, the S&P needs to go down, and I got out or I shorted or something like that, and I am unwilling to make a change, that's one of the most challenging examples of being able to know yourself and also know when will you identify that you were incorrect. So, and that specific scenario is one of the hardest to deal with because you're either out of a trade or you're short and you're at a loss, and either way you're missing opportunity in the proper direction of the trade. So if you're short, then it's going up and you're missing the long side, you're losing money in that case. Or if you're just out, you're in cash, you're missing the opportunity of profit from being in the market. And we need to be able to identify, why do I have this conviction in this scenario and the market disagrees with me? Is this market dislocation so that I have, in some ways, an even greater advantage now with this conviction that I believe that the market is mispriced and therefore I will do X, Y, or Z? Or do you say, well, obviously the market does not agree with me and therefore here is my spot that I will get out of this trade? The worst thing to do in these scenarios is to freeze and ignore the situation when this trade is against you. And oftentimes I think it's easy to have this conviction and then use this overall conviction of saying, oh, well, this market has got to go down more, so I'm going to double down or triple down or whatever. That's a very dangerous attitude, and some of the smartest traders, macro managers, whatever else in the world, some of the smartest, most successful people in markets, they'll tell you that losers average down losers. And while that may not be a perfect analogy for you, maybe your plan is to essentially allocate your trade setup over several tranches or whatever else because you have a zone that you wish to be filled in. that's not really what I think someone means. I think it was Paul Tudor Jones had something in his office where he said losers average losers. I don't think that's really what that means. Is if that's your plan, then that's your plan. But what if you hit your fills and then you say, okay, I'm done, I'm ready, let's go, and it still continues to go well beyond where you're supposed to be, and your risk tolerance is being put to the test. At that point, if you say, all right, I'm adding more to this position if you were in on the long side, or vice versa, I'm going to continue shorting this market because it must go down. That's when we become the loser that's averaging losers, because we're not following our plan, and instead we're following a gut instinct, but that instinct is lying to us, because what we're seeing play out in the real world is not the same thing as was our idea. And we have to be okay with being wrong, with our conviction being wrong. Because if you're not, and if you end up putting too much on the line for this trade, or you take too much risk and you take too long to take it off when you're wrong, all that you'll do is destroy yourself, destroy your capital, and destroy your confidence to take the next trade. We need to be able to be tough, to stand by our conviction, and even tougher to know that the market has decided that we are wrong and that it's time to step aside and wait for the next setup. So I hope that what you'll take from this, because I know it's not a specific task, is to consider, what is my conviction in a trade? And it's good. Honestly, I do think it's really good to have conviction one way or the other in a trade so that you have an idea. I think it's a good skill to have, to be able to flip and be on both sides of the market. But I think it's really good to be able to have a plan, have a thesis, to identify why do you have conviction in a particular trade and understand why you're setting it up that way. And then most importantly, how do I know that it's time to get out of this trade and it's time to call it a day, take my loss, and predefine hopefully what that loss is. But at worst, to be able to identify during the trade that you no longer have that conviction or that you're wrong, and to be able to survive and move on. And that's going to be one of the greatest keys that we have to be able to have a longer lasting trading career, because most people don't make it. And I think this is one of the big reasons why.